Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Nintendo Watcher Podcast. I'm Justin, joined as always by my co-host, Matthew. Matthew, what's up?
Hey, Justin. Good to be back. It's been a little while. We've had some scheduling issues, but we're back.
We are back, baby. All right. How have you been?
Man, it's been crazy. It's been hectic. It's been stressful. It's been busy, and it's been a whole lot of fun. But we'll save some of that for the episode. What about you? What's everything been going on for the last couple weeks?
Busy, man. Very, very busy. Haven't actually been playing that many games. I've actually tried out a few, but I've been bouncing off of a lot of them. Just really trying to find a good game to play before Breath of the Wild. Like, I don't really want to get super invested in anything.
Yeah.
And I'm having a hard time finding like that nice 10, 15 hour game right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you bring that up because that's sort of the impetus of this episode, right? What we're talking about today, because I've been going through a similar sort of experience where, I finished up a couple games that I was playing and then just kind of lost interest for for a week or two. Didn't really know what to jump into, with Tears of the Kingdom just around the corner. I don't want to start anything too long or, drawn out. And so, I just kind of wanted to check in, what have we been playing? What have we been up to? And it brought me to the topic that I really want to discuss today, which is, in the last, 3 weeks now? So I think I started at the very beginning of April. So like April, I think 3rd, I started this thing. I started playing through the Resident Evil series for the 5th or 6th attempt at getting into this series in my history. I've talked about this long time ago, maybe back in like the 3rd or 4th episode, about how horror games are a genre that I love, but I'm absolutely terrified of. And I kind of thought, with the Resident Evil 4 remake recently releasing, and, having got its start as a GameCube exclusive way back when, right? One of the few, that slew of, I think it was like 4 or 5 Capcom exclusives that came to the GameCube in the early years.
Yeah, the Resident Evil 1 and 2 remakes were exclusive to the GameCube too, right?
1, I'm not sure about 2, but Resident Evil 1 remake and Resident Evil 0, I think
that was it. It was
might
0.
have been. And then we had, the Beautiful Joe, and a couple other games that came out of Team Clover, I think it was, that went off to be Platinum Games and, the team behind Bayonetta and all that, right? So, but I started thinking also about the guilt that I felt this year about my backlog, right? We talked about this, at the beginning of the year. I said I'm going to try to play 24 games off my backlog this year.
Big resolution.
And that number was not happening as of the end of March. I was way out on that number, wasn't coming anywhere close. And then Resident Evil 4 remake releases, and it's getting, I don't know if you've followed much of that, but it's getting pretty much widespread acclaim. Some are saying it's even better than the original, which some people hold as one of like the top 5 games of all time. And I decide that this is the time. Now is my time. I'm going to knock out a couple games on my backlog. I'm going to get into the Resident Evil series. I'm going to stick with it this time. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 3 weeks. I've been playing through the modern remakes of Resident Evil. That's Resident Evil 2 and 3, which we have on the Switch via cloud versions, unfortunately. But we do have cloud versions of 2 and 3 remakes on the Nintendo Switch. And then I played through the Resident Evil 4 remaster all the way through. I think it was final playtime was something in the realm of 15 hours, which is, I think, a little bit long, but we'll talk about why that was as we get into the meat of the episode. But I've been finding that it's a really nice little series to jump into if I want to knock a couple games out of the backlog real quick, while also accomplishing the task of, seeing a series that I've heard nothing but, praise for, with the exception of a few, mid-era gaffes for quite a while now. Do you have much experience with the Resident Evil series in general, or with survival horror games as a whole?
So I own all of the Resident Evil games that are available on the Switch, like all of the GameCube era ones.
I think
And
it's
I played,
most of them now. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. I played through the first one. I remember playing through the first one on the GameCube, that
Hmm.
remaster, and just thinking, you know, I can't believe how good this looks. Like, and
Hmm.
it helps that the camera angle is really cinematic, and it just looks like nothing else did at the time. And I played it years and years ago on the GameCube. I picked it up a few years ago, maybe like a year ago on the Switch, and started playing through it. And it didn't have the quality of life stuff that I was looking for.
Yeah.
Like I remember one thing, and maybe this is just me and I just couldn't figure out how to play, but I remember one thing being you couldn't drop items once you've picked them up.
Yeah, there's like pretty much you're exclusively in most of the games, right? It's item boxes or completely discarding. It's like really your
Yeah.
only option once you've picked something up,
Yeah, it's a
which,
huge pain whenever, you don't really know what you need to pick up to do the puzzles and all that stuff. So I played like 5 or 6 hours of it.
mhm,
Maybe not even that much. Maybe it was like 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours. I enjoyed it, but I got stuck because I was like, "Oh, okay, well my inventory's full. I don't know where I can find an item box in this area
yeah,
of the mansion." It was just kind of a pain, so I bounced.
yeah.
But
And
I'd always like to go back and play through them though, because I don't want that to make me miss out on a huge franchise. And 8 looked awesome.
mhm,
Resident Evil 4, I've read the reviews, I've watched some of the YouTube reviews too, and a lot of the people that I follow on YouTube love that game and have nothing but praise for it.
yeah.
So I feel like I'm missing out on something.
Yeah, I mean, you're a big fan of the Fatal Frame series though as well, right? That's a series that you have some fondness for as far as like
Yeah,
survival horror goes, right?
yeah, I should have mentioned that one. I like that
So
one a lot, mainly because it's, as opposed to Resident Evil, like it's very different. Like your weapon is the camera obscura, and I think it's an interesting twist on horror games. But
yeah.
yeah, I'm really into those. Really should get into Resident Evil, I guess.
Yeah. The main reason I wanted to have this conversation is the fact that it sounds like from like our conversations and things we've had, like you jump into those games, they may not be like your standard cup of tea, but when you get in, you play them, you enjoy them. There's no anxiety about the horror elements. You seem to do fine with that, from what I gather. Is that true, relatively
Um,
speaking?
Relatively speaking, I mean, sometimes I've been pretty freaked out, but it's more of like jump scares, right? It's not like this like um anxiety or like this being scared of the dark that I know some people get whenever they play
Yeah.
horror games.
So
Um,
you're not gripping the controller, palms sweating, phone in your other hand as like a safety mechanism throughout
no,
the entire playthrough. Okay. So
no,
that's
not
just
me.
me
That's
is
just you.
what okay. All right. So
That's just
cuz
you.
this is what I'm getting at. The the problem I have, the reason it's taken me so long to get through the Resident Evil series is that I am a self-described coward and scaredy cat. I do not do well with horror video games. They freak me out. I don't like the agency in horror games. I have a problem being the one controlling the character, and I know that this is the hang up because I love a good horror movie, right? You'll put on any horror movie. It doesn't matter what genre, what era. I will enjoy it. I will sit down. I will watch it. I'll make it through it just fine. I get a kick out of it, right? I love that sort of adrenaline that you feel from scares and being a little bit on the edge of your seat. But there's something about the second I get a controller in my hand, I just I can't. I can't do it. And yet, I love the concept of horror video games. I love games with dark, moody atmospheres. I like, monsters and zombies and all of that. And so, Resident Evil has always been sort of a blind spot in my gaming franchises. I grew up as a big fan of the PS1. I remember those early day tank control games, watching my stepbrothers play them, being too afraid to play them myself. And I think it actually got worse because I really got my own interest in horror games around the time of the, maybe PS4, PS3, PS4 era. So when we were starting to move towards more realism in the graphic side of things, right? When things were actually starting to get more realistic looking, a little bit scarier.
Sure.
Um, And so I remember, you know, picking up the remake of Resident Evil 1 and having it in my Steam library for something like 4 years before I finally managed to sit down and play through it. Um, this was not, I bought it, 4 years went by, I installed it for the first time, right? And I need to make this very clear that I have a very um, sort of stutter step history with the Resident Evil series. I own, as you do, I own every game in the series, right? Either between my Switch, PC, or PlayStation 5, I've got them all, right? As of as of tonight, I have completed 6 Resident Evil games: Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Remake, Remake 2, Remake 3, the remake of 4, and 7. So I've now completed 6 of those. 3 of those, however, were completed within the last 24 days, right? I
Nuts,
started
man.
them at the
It's
start
nuts.
of May, and I played through 2, 3, and 4 back to back. I'm currently playing 8, which is Village. And I have to say, you would think by that pace, right? The fact that I managed to get through 3 games in the span of 3 weeks, that I'm cured, right? I'm getting through the games, I'm booting them up, I'm making progress, I'm making it through. And then you remember the average play time is somewhere in the realm of 5 to 7 hours for a Resident Evil game. That's a weekend for some people. For most people that I know that play video games, it's a weekend. And I'm spreading these out as long as I can for the most part. But the reason for this is I don't know what it is about these games, but as I've already sort of talked about, there's an element in horror video games, right, of control, right, of player choice that makes you know the distance between me and the horror somehow unmanageable, right? Somehow unmanageable to the point where I will I will stand in front of a door in a Resident Evil game, knowing full well that there's a room on the other side, right? That I've never been in before. Could be empty, could have one zombie in it, could have two, could have a new monster, whatever. And I will stand in front of that door for 15 minutes, no exaggeration, turn around, go back to the save station, save my game,
Just in
sprint
case.
through the door just to see what's in there, die to whatever's in there if there's something in there. And then if I die, reset my game, go back through prepared for the challenge, right? I approach these games as someone who has never played a video game before in their entire lives. There's something about my brain just shuts off when I play these games. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about the process of how you play a horror game as a coward, because something I do know is there's a lot of people out there that share my love of the aesthetic of Resident Evil, my love of the gameplay of Resident Evil, but also my crippling anxiety over jump scares, pursuer enemies, the unknown, whatever you want to call it, and the agency required to get through these games. So, I kind of want to go through what it is to play a horror game when you have whatever's going on up here, right, taking place.
So
So,
I've got a few
yeah,
questions for you.
please.
So it's so interesting to me that you say that because I think that scary movies are so much worse than video games because I don't have the agency. Like I can't
Really?
control what's going to happen. Yeah, when I see like actors doing something like, "No, don't go in there. Don't go in there. You're going to get killed." And they do it anyway and then you see them get killed. I feel like I can make a better decision in a video game because I'm in
Okay.
control. So it's so interesting that you're saying the complete opposite for you. Now, I am wondering, and maybe you want to get to this later. So if you do, we can put it on ice. But playing through so many Resident Evil games
Mhm.
back to back in a short period of time, have you become desensitized to any of it?
No, no. And I'll talk about that as we get through it. But one thing that I'm learning, and this is something that I'm learning it. People have known this forever. Resident Evil has evolved a lot over the years, so much so that every experience, every Resident Evil experience, brings something new and terrifying to the table. And we'll talk about that as I talk about the games that I've been playing most recently, and kind of what those add or change that you know
I was
um,
going to ask you about that too before you
pump
go
that up.
on. Like, I've read and heard sort of just like in the zeitgeist that the Resident Evil games have become much more action based and
Mhm.
less horror based.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when you think about the Resident Evil series, it's really hard to talk about the series today in a way that accounts for all of the history of that series, right? I mean, because it started back in the PS1 era where, hardware limitations meant, pre-rendered backgrounds, loading screens between every door, with that like first person door open, right? Where you have no idea what's
Oh, it's
coming
the
up and it's
worst.
very terrifying, right?
It's on the Switch
Um,
version too.
yeah, but it's no longer in the most recent remakes. That's a hallmark of the old hardware and the limitations. The pre-rendered backgrounds, right, which are these really vivid, really scary and well done drawings, have been replaced with um, actual backgrounds, interactable backgrounds and things like that. So that's taken away some of the edge for some people and added new horrors for others. But there was a period, right, around, I want to say, just after. I'd say Resident Evil 5 is what is most often cited as the kind of tipping point for the shark jump for Resident Evil, right? If we want to talk about it as such, because at the time, Resident Evil 4, when it first released on the GameCube, it was seen as like the evolution of Resident Evil, right? It was an action focused game, but it's still, you had to stop, right, in place to fire your gun. So there were still like restrictions on movement that made for some, terror and intense combat. There was, a lot more emphasis though on swarms of enemies and, a variety of weapons and approaches to combat to allow you to kind of really get into the that,
Lots of
um,
ammo.
yeah, to get into like a groove, right? And to feel like you could take on whatever challenges came your way, which was not the case in, Code Veronica back to Resident Evil 1, where scarcity was key, right? The
Yeah.
game really restricted your control over how much ammo you had. You had to use ribbons to save your game, right? So that like you could only save as a limited quantity. That's now gone from, I think, as of the RE2 remake is when they really got rid of that, like
Thank God.
wholesale.
That's
Um,
such a dumb
but
mechanic.
for a lot of people though, that was part of the anxiety, part of the, and I think when you have hardware limitations where you look at Resident Evil 1, it's not a scary looking game, right? So you've got to do other things to create tension, right? Limit the amount of ammo that the player has, cut off their visibility with static camera angles, use clunky tank controls that make movement and every action feel really sort of weighted, and then
There's a
give you,
heft to it.
yeah. And then give you limited control over, safety in the form of, limiting your use of a save file, which for many people, I finished Resident Evil 4, for example, with 100 saves. I know people who get through the game with like 5. So just comparison's sake, right? But then around Resident Evil 5, right, which was, I think, PS3. I
Was
might
it
be getting
3?
this wrong. It could be PS4, PS3, PS4. Um, we started to see like a real emphasis on action. And a lot of people said that is when not only did the stories become even more nonsensical than they already were. The series has always been campy, relatively nonsensical, but interesting, right? Around 5, it starts to go a little off the rails. You have the famous boulder punching scene where a character does a quick time event to punch through a boulder that's crashing down on them. And then in 6, right, they split the game into 3 campaigns. It played more like a Gears of War than it did a survival horror game. Only one of the 3 campaigns really focuses on zombies. The rest, it's more like, action focused combat scenarios. And so a lot of fans really felt that the series had kind of lost its way, right? Starting with 5 and then concluding with 6. Not to mention all the spin-offs. You have light gun games. You've got the Revelation series, which tried to like rein in the horror a little bit more, but did it in an episodic way that people didn't really find all that great. And then the series kind of disappears for a handful of years right after 6, right?
That's kind
And
of like, mirroring what Capcom did with a lot of its
yes.
franchises, right? Like, they were on the outs with a lot of their franchises
Mm-hmm,
around
mm-hmm.
that same time.
Yeah, there was a period where Capcom had just kind of lost a lot of the goodwill they built up in the PS1, PS2 days, and we're starting to see a lot of backlash for the decisions they were making creatively. I mean, I think this probably starts with Street Fighter 4, as well as the earlier, the Resident Evils 5 and 6. Those games all kind of viewed somewhat negatively. And then Street Fighter 5 comes out, and that one really gets kind of lambasted for a long time, and Capcom's in a pretty tough, tricky spot. And then they release Resident Evil 7, right? Biohazard 7, Resident Evil 7, which is the first entry that is in first person mode. It stars an entirely new protagonist. The monsters are different. The setting is different, right? It really kind of soft reboots the series. Does have some connections towards the end game and then into 8. But overall, it was kind of like a new era, right? And a lot of people credit Final Fantasy VII with the revival of not only Resident Evil, but Capcom as a whole, right? As being this phenomenal game. And that was kind of maybe the point where I decided, I'm ready to jump back in, right? I'm ready to try this one more time. So I'd already owned a handful of the Resident Evil games at that point. I'd never played them, but Resident Evil 7 came out, and it was, I'd heard so much buzz about it, right? The new first person perspective creates a really tense, scary atmosphere, but the gameplay is really good. The setting's really interesting. The story is actually compelling. And I decided I wanted to play it, right? But I have this thing with series where if I'm going to jump into a new series, even if the individual entries aren't connected, I always want to start at the beginning, right?
Me
At
too.
least at the beginning. I don't necessarily have to play through every entry, but I want to start at the beginning, right?
It's so hard to
Um,
go back if you don't, right? Like, if you get
yeah.
used to whatever mechanics you have in the later games, it's so hard to go back to the first one. I'm the same way. I will play, especially RPGs,
Hmm.
even if they're not connected. I like going back and seeing where they started. And in a lot of situations, if I hadn't have done that, like Dragon Quest, I think is a really
Yeah.
good example. If I wouldn't have gone back and played those early Dragon Quest games first, I don't know if I ever would have.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a fair point because there's, the evolutions of, mechanics and systems and just graphics and storytelling, acumen, all create situations where that reverse, that move backwards could be really rough. So that's kind of what I did. I went back and I played the very first Resident Evil, but I shouldn't say the very first, right? I played the remake, the one you were talking about, right? That came out originally for the GameCube. I played the PC release of it.
Still a good looking game, even
Very
today.
good looking game. I think the pre-rendered backgrounds that they were using in that era really stand out and hold up well. It's the same reason I love games with, cell shaded art styles and stuff like that. I like games that feel like they hold up as, hardware, progresses. We still have a lot of games that look really good for various, decisions they made. And I think the art direction in Resident Evil 1, right, that remake of RE1 is top notch, right? It still holds up really well. Um, but that game took me what would take a normal person a weekend. I played that game over a month and a half. It took me a month and a half to beat Resident Evil because I could not sit down and play that game for more than 30 minutes at a time. There's no exaggeration, right? 30 minutes at a time. There's, again, the anxiety gets too much and I just have to walk away for a bit, right?
Let me ask you this. So you're taking your time playing through this game.
Yes.
Are you playing with strategy guides? Because I know you're a fan of strategy guides in some games.
Yeah. So maybe we should just dive into my process for how to complete a
Okay.
horror game, right? And this is the process that I've used for every Resident Evil game that I have completed.
You're an expert at this point.
Yes, this is my foolproof system to getting through a horror game when you are sweating and terrified the entire time.
Your patented system. You
Yes,
should
the
be
patented system.
selling this.
I know. You too can beat a Resident Evil game if you follow these rules. Now, um, this is going to make me sound insane. It's going to make it seem like I do not actually enjoy the Resident Evil games. I am going to be accused of never having truly completed a Resident Evil game. And most people are going to say that I've robbed myself of something essential to playing video games because there are a lot of steps in this process, and most of them people would call sacrilege. Just for general gaming, I'm not even talking for survival horror games. I'm just talking general gaming sacrileges that I've conducted in order in this pursuit of Resident Evil completionism. Now, I will say there has been a small revelation in recent weeks where my time spent using some of these systems has reduced. Right, I've changed a few of these rules as I've played more and more. I have not necessarily, like, again, I wouldn't say I'm desensitized to them, but I'm hardened at this point. Right, I'm still a coward. I still only play for about 30 to an hour at most, right, when I play a session, but overall these rules still apply. So let's talk about the process, right? Because the process is not, it doesn't start when you hit, new game and select the difficulty. It starts before that, right? It starts first with watching a review of the game, right? You have to do it. You have to
Got to do it.
watch a review of the game. I'm not talking, reading a review. I'm talking watch a video review with gameplay, because you need to know what you're getting into. Now, they're not going to spoil a lot of stuff in video game reviews, but they're going to give you a sense of what you're up against. And knowing that is key to knowing, right, how to mentally prepare yourself for a particular game. Now, I say this because I think about the Resident Evil series as each game, iterating on previous entries. In Resident Evil 2 Remake, for example, if I did not know about Mr. X before playing that game, I would have seen Mr. X at the beginning of the game and I would have turned it off and never come back to it. In fact, that is what happened for 3 attempts to play Resident Evil 2 Remake. I got to Mr. X, I turned off the game, set it aside. I said, I'll be back to this. Something else came out, I played that instead, and I said, I don't really need to go back to that. I think I'm okay. And I never came back to it until several months down the road. I bought Resident Evil 2 Remake when it came out. I think it was 2019, 2020. I think 2019. And I did not complete it until the beginning of this month in 2023. So that should give you a sense of where we're at. Again, not for a lack of trying. I attempted many times, but start by watching a review. It's going to desensitize you to some of the stuff. It's going to give you a preview, let you know what you're up against. So that's rule number 1. Start with a review. Then you get into the game, right?
I feel like this is
actually,
like a
no.
Rocky
Yep.
montage or something
This
you're
is
going through.
this is not even before you even got in the game. There's a couple things you got to do to your surroundings, right? Because your environment is key for a
It's the
good survival
ambiance.
horror experience. The ambiance is important. Now, some people would recommend, play a survival horror game with headphones. My recommendation is don't you dare. You'll never make it through it. You'll turn it off within a minute. I recommend you play with the audio as quiet as you can get it. Muted is fine, honestly. It's okay. Though you do want it up a little bit so you can hear monsters, because it is important to know when a threat's coming. But keep that muted, and then find yourself a nice little podcast. Find yourself a nice little soothing podcast to listen to, because it really helps to have some weirdos talking about nothing in the background while you are trying to focus on what's ahead of you in the game. It's going to distract you enough from what's happening in the game.
Could even listen to this one.
Go for it. Throw us on there. We are drab enough to get you through a Resident Evil game. I promise. Throw this episode on so you can be kind of meditating through the process of playing Resident Evil with me, right? As I walk you through the steps. So right now you've got, you're sitting in your room. You've got your podcast on, your volume low or muted, and now you're thinking, okay, what else do I need to do? How else do I set this scene? 1, play during the day if you can. Please play in a brightly lit room. Open up all your windows. Get that light in there, right? If you don't have that option, you just got to pump up the lights, right? I've got a couple of, ring light type doodads here. I've got a big old light in the corner of my room. The ceiling fan light, they're all on. Everything's on. The windows are shut if it's nighttime, wide open if it's daytime. That's what we're doing, right? You don't want to feel like you're playing at nighttime. The nightmares are not worth it, right? Get in there, play in the brightest setting you can find. Okay. And then you're going to crank that brightness within the game up as high as you can get it. I'm talking like there's usually going to be like 2 or 3 brightness settings in a Resident Evil game. You want to make sure when they say make it till the thing is just barely visible, get it as visible as it can be on the screen when they show you that little icon or whatever it is.
No,
You gotta see it.
You're talking about this for horror games, but I do this for other games as well,
Yeah.
because games are so
They're
dark.
so dark nowadays. I'm a fan of pumping up the brightness on most games, but on horror games it is absolutely crucial. Everything's too dark these days. Movies, games, TV shows, it's all a nightmare, right? We don't know how to do lighting anymore.
Yeah.
It's bad. Even if you can adjust the gamma, go ahead and do that too. It's going to make the game look like crap, but hey, it's going to make everything super bright, and you're going to, nothing's going to sneak up on you in the shadows because there won't be any shadows, and that's useful. Um, and then I go with a nice, soothing, easy difficulty, right? Whatever the lowest difficulty is. The nice thing about these Resident Evil games, right? Um, they starting with 7, they got back to scary, right? Resident Evil 7 is a scary game. Some people say it's the scariest game in the series. Having played through what I've played through, I would agree at this point. 2 is also quite scary. 3 a little bit less so, but still quite scary. Very more tense than scary, I think. But uh, you know Capcom added these really nice assisted difficulties in the recent remakes that have auto aim, like aim assist, automatically turned on. You start with more weapons and items. I think these have actually been, even back in the earlier days, they had sort of easier mode difficulties that allowed for starting with different weapons and items and healing a little bit and things like that, which soothed the experience. Because I found that for me, just feeling like I am going to land my shots better makes me feel a little bit more secure in whatever I'm playing.
You don't have to
It's
worry about wasting bullets quite so
Yeah,
much.
because these games, they love to make ammo scarce, right? And scarcity is how they really pump up the fear in a lot of these games. So if you remove that element a little bit, right, calms the nerves a little bit. And so
I do have a
these are all,
confession though.
yeah, go.
So I've got a confession about, I think it's Resident Evil 4, but I can't remember because I have
It's
never
been too
even
long.
attempted to play it. I bought whatever Resident Evil is available on the Oculus Quest 2.
Yeah, the VR. Yep, that's yes, Resident Evil 4 VR,
And
which
like what you were saying earlier about feeling drawn to it, like, oh man, it looks so cool. I
mm-hmm.
want to play it. Like, I like the sort of dark and gothic atmosphere. That's what got me. I was like, oh man, of course I've got to get this game. And I paid, whatever, 20 or 30 bucks or whatever it costs. Never even played it. I looked at some of the screenshots inside the VR and I was like, yeah, no.
It's so
Maybe one
scary.
day. Have you
So
have you
scary.
played the VR?
I've watched a little bit here and there, but no, I've never played it. I haven't played it. I don't think I could. VR horror is a whole nother. We don't have time for that. But I also have an Oculus Quest 2 back there. I have a couple horror games on there, and I don't think I've made it more than 15 minutes into a single one. It's I can't do it, man. I can't. I
Sensory
mean,
overload. There's not enough light in the world.
no, no. Not to mention, you're also competing with the potential disorientation and nausea from VR, depending on how those games work for you. But so far, right, all of these recommendations are pretty standard stuff, right? I mean, you remove the atmosphere in most horror experiences, right? I mean, you watch a horror movie, if you turn that volume down, most of the horror is zapped right out of a horror film without the soundtrack, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's kind of
sound
funny.
plays, yeah, right? Sound plays a huge element in these games and in movies and horror in general, because it really sort of gets you on edge, right? Without you even realizing it a lot of the time. And so, you pump up the brightness, you remove the element of surprise, you reduce the sound, you get rid of all the anxiety that they're trying to trick you with there, and that's all standard stuff, right? Most people, that's enough for them, right? If you do those things, you'll make it through just fine. It might take you a little while, but you'll get through there. You'll manage to clear it. But that's not enough for me, right? That is not enough for me to beat these games. And this is where we get into my methods, where I know I'm going to get called out for just not being a true gamer or whatever it is, right? I'm gonna get some flack for this.
What, you're gonna get
Um,
flack for something else, not any of the stuff you've already talked about?
well, I mean, maybe, but this is the real stuff, right? Because you asked me about playing with guides, right? And I've been on record as saying that if you want to play a game, right, because you think it looks cool, you've heard nice things about it, but you just feel like you'd be overwhelmed by the systems, that you'd struggle to get hooked by it because there's just too much to learn or whatever it might be, play with a guide, man. Grab yourself a guide, jump in there. I'm a firm believer in spoilers not mattering. Right. This is something that I've held firm for a very long time. I try not to spoil people because I know that people are very sensitive about that. But I tend to have no issue with knowing how something is going to play out. It rarely ruins my enjoyment of a thing to know how it ends. Right. The
But
same goes.
surprises, though, right? Like, you don't want to be spoiled of a surprise in a game.
No, I like truly, I genuinely don't tend to care, right? Because for me, it's more what leads up to that revelation. What what is the approach and follow through of that revelation? That is always the most interesting thing to me. If the reveal in itself is the biggest thing, it's an unsuccessful twist, in my opinion.
That's fair, but are you saying that if you know that the reveal is coming and you can see like the clues along the way, it doesn't take away from it for you? Like when I'm experiencing something, whether it's a TV show or a
Yeah.
movie or a game or whatever, the big reveal is often a huge surprise to me at the end. And then on a replay or a rewatch, then I see the trail of breadcrumbs, and
Mm-hmm.
that's like satisfying on a different level.
Yeah.
But I think I would miss it that first time.
That might have to do with the fact that I'm not rewatching or replaying anything. I'm going through it one time and I'm done.
You're
Right.
done.
So for me, I kind of like having a sense of what's to come so I can start paying attention to those things and get that experience the first time through. Now, again, that's
Ah,
not to
okay.
say that I don't also enjoy going in blind to a lot of games. A lot of things I do. And I use guides and walkthroughs and things like that as entries into things that I would typically find to be too overwhelming, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Again, I I don't think that the Saga series of RPGs are user friendly. I don't think they are intuitive. I don't think they're user friendly. I think they are a major turnoff if you don't understand the systems. And so I looked up guides and I read tips and tricks and I watched some brief gameplay videos to learn how these games work. And then I played them. And I don't think that I lost anything in the discovery. In fact, I think that knowing that allowed me the appreciation that I would never have gotten to because I never would have stuck around long enough,
Yeah, that's
right? To
exactly
actually
what
feel it.
happens to me with the Saga games. I can't stick with them
Mm-hmm.
because I refuse to look up a guide, and I just end up screwing up. We've
Mm-hmm.
talked about it before with Saga Frontiers, like walking into the final boss, very underprepared, not being able to get out of the dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those are games that, like, I've got hate in my heart for that game.
Yes. And I think that's fair because I think that there are a lot of games and a lot of systems that are they are I'm not trying to like say that they're gate kept or anything like that's not what I'm getting at, but like they're designed for a particular gamer in mind. They've got a particular gamer in mind, a particular personality, a particular style of gameplay in mind. And if you don't adhere to or mesh with those styles, you're going to jump off the boat, right? That's any genre, right? Like I mean,
Yeah,
you talk about any media, any genre. Some things work for you, some things don't. I find personally, right, that reading guides, watching playthroughs, watching speedruns in particular, to be really compelling ways for me to get into something without spoiling too much for myself. So this is my other tip for a horror game in particular is to watch a speed run of that horror game. Watch a speed run because this is the beauty of speed runs. They are largely incomprehensible from a story perspective. You're going to barely be spoiled on narrative because speedrunners are skipping every cutscene that is skippable. They are glitching through major sections of the game. They are playing in a way that no actual player will typically approach the game. So they're going to
sure.
miss large sections of said game. But what they're going to do is they're going to give you a quick, fast look at some of the environments you'll encounter. They're going to give you some strategies for how to manage resources in combat in a way that is helpful to understand, where resources might be limited or where they might be flush. And they're going to give you enough of an understanding of the game to know what it is that you're getting to in a way that the review itself cannot. Right? I find
Yeah,
that speedruns are a great way to do that without spoiling yourself on the narrative.
I totally agree about speed runs. They do a great job of distilling what's important about a
Mm-hmm.
game very quickly because they're not worried about any of the side stuff.
Right.
Nothing that, if you're playing through like your garden variety playthrough, you're like interested in or trying to uncover, like, is this going to be an important part of the game? Like, is a side quest going to be important? No, they are showing you exactly what you have to do to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I've in these experiences, right, I've managed to, see most of the game. experience most of the scenes, but in a way that is so disjointed and confusing that when I approach those sections in actual gameplay, the surprises are still there, right? The experience is still one in which I am seeing things for the first time in this way, right? In this shape, this form, whatever it might be. And so for me, that's a big, way of overcoming, right, a mental block that I have, which is the anxiety of the unknown, right? Because for me, the hardest part about these games is, as I said, when there's a door that I can't get through or I've never been through, right? I don't know what's on the other side. And having some sense of it, right? Even if it's just confirmation that yes, there will be an enemy in there,
Yeah.
right? I may ruin a jump scare for myself, but what I find is I actually create a higher tension in myself because I'm anticipating and creating dread in myself, right, as I play
Because
through these games
you
because I
know it's
know that
there.
it's coming. But I've I've experienced it in such a disconnected fashion or such a different fashion that I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. I don't know exactly where I'll find it, how I'll experience it. And so it creates a new kind of tension, but one that I can deal with, right?
Mhm.
I still feel the anxiety, I still feel the stress, but I at least am somewhat prepared. And so I can throw myself into that situation in a trial basis, right? I
Sure.
I approach the situation. I
Like
see how
inoculating yourself to the horror.
essentially, right. I throw myself into the next room or environment. I approach, right, whatever the threat is, and if it kills me, it kills me. I restart. I try again, right. But I don't have that same sense of dread that I would be if I had no idea what was coming. And so for me, that's helpful, right. This is a way for me to get through these games in ways that I still find very enjoyable, right. I've pretty much experienced the whole game before I've played it, through the speed runs, through looking at brief guides, and that kind of stuff. But I've saved enough of the surprises because I refuse. I'll open up a guide page, right, a guide to a Resident Evil game, and I'll just look at a section, right. Resident Evil One, Raccoon City Police Department. All right, and I will scan that just to see how long is this section compared to like the next section. I'll look at a couple screenshots just to get a sense of what threats are in there, but I'll never read them in full. Right? I don't want to be told exactly where to go and how to go, but I want to have a sense of what threats, what violence is coming my way, and what weapons and defenses and stuff I might come across in the process, so I can prepare myself mentally for that experience.
So as we're wrapping up here, I've got two big questions for you. I'll
Please.
ask them both, and then you can just riff off of them and take as long as you want. Um, so one question, it's not very well formulated, but I'm wondering, is there is there a reticence to play something with a lot of blood and gore and violence? Like, is that part of the apprehension for playing? It is for me. Like, I don't like a
Hmm.
ton of blood and gore. I'm just wondering how that plays into horror for you. For me, horror is more about the unknown. Like, I don't
Yes.
know what's going to be there, but I also don't like the gory stuff. If I'm going to play something, I prefer the anticipation, the
Yeah.
unknown, the dark, that sort of stuff. So that's one question. Second question is, of the Resident Evil games you've played, which one is the scariest? Like, which
So
one bothered you the most?
So, for the first question, for me, the gore element has never been a problem for me. Like when it comes to, horror films, for example, like I don't mind a grindhouse film, I don't mind a slasher, right? I'm fine with all of those. Gameplay, I think of like the Doom series, right, which is just all blood and gore, right? Like Doom Eternal, right? 2016 Doom and Doom Eternal. Love those games. They're great fun, right? I have no problem with that kind of viscera and whatnot. That's not really the anxiety for me. For me, it's absolutely the unknown, right? The what is around the corner. Because jump scares, right? Yes, they get me every time. But for me, it's more like anxiety of to put it in terms of Resident Evil. The Resident Evil has this phenomenal system that started in Resident Evil 2, right? They call them pursuer enemies. Right, in Resident Evil 2, it's Mr. X, and 3, it's the Nemesis. You've got these different characters. In 7, it's the Baker family. And they're these NPCs, these monsters, right, that follow you and stalk you through the environments, right? They appear in sometimes scripted, sometimes unscripted locations. And so you might be walking through, for example, the Raccoon Police Department. You go into a room, nothing's there, you grab an item, you leave, you start to head towards the exit, and the door opens and there's a 8 foot tall monster chasing you, right? And then you have to play a mini game of route yourself around them, find a safe spot, get to a safe zone or get far enough away from them, knock them out, whatever it is, before you could just go back to completing whatever small task you had. And these characters terrify me. Even if you only run into them, like in Resident Evil Village, the most recent one, the most recent new entry, not counting four, there's Lady Dimitrescu, who is this, the 8 foot tall vampire that the internet fell in love with when she was announced, who stalks you for only about an hour of that game. If you're playing through her section, straightforward, it takes about an hour. And she only stalks you for about half of that, a third of that time. I only encountered her maybe 3 instances in my game, but every time, right, I was terrified. I had to run, find a safe spot, get to a save room, wait until she disappeared. But despite the fact that I only ran into her 3 times and those moments were 2-3 minutes max, the anxiety of knowing she could show up at any point and it was unscripted, very hard to get through.
Mm.
That section, which should take most players 30 minutes to an hour, took me about 2. And I played it in about 5 different sessions, gameplay sessions.
I figured she was gonna be a much bigger part of that game. I haven't
Mm-mm.
played it, but just from seeing everything online, and I
It's a
figured
big
that she was
criticism of
like
it.
a yeah, huh.
Yeah. Now, as for the scariest game, I think I've already said this, but for me, it's Resident Evil 7, at least of the ones that I've played. Because of the first person perspective, right? It's very claustrophobic. You don't have the field of vision that you do in the other games. There's pursuer enemies. The setting is just very scary and dark, and there's the great use of jump scares and stuff. They mix up the types of horror a lot. But one thing that every Resident Evil game has in common is they have really strong first acts where the terror
Mm,
is at its peak, and then they move more actiony, less terror, more action based fear in the latter half. And so I think every game has their moments. For example, in Village that I'm playing right now, probably the single scariest moment in a Resident Evil game is the second environment that you go to, the second castle area that you go into in the game, where you're in a dollhouse and you're stripped of all your weapons and you have to solve essentially an escape room, right, with no weapons the whole time, and you're in a doll maker's house. Like, I'm not going to spoil anything about it, say anything more, but a lot happens in that short gameplay session, which is one that you could get through in 10-15 minutes if you know it and know how to do it. But if you're approaching it
sure.
for your first time, you don't know the puzzles, you don't know the layout, you don't know what scares and setups are in store for you. It's just tension from the moment your weapons are taken away and the lights go out to when you finally escape. And it works really, really well. And so each game has things, right? Like Mr. X in RE2 was just too much, right?
Sure.
Whereas Nemesis in 3, which works similarly to Mr. X, is less scary because he's scripted, whereas Mr. X is procedural, right? He just kind of shows up and messes your day up when he feels like it. So they've all got their moments, but for me, I've found that, like, I'm glad that even though I'm playing these games in a way that most people would see as, a heinous affront to, the Resident Evil series and gaming in general, I'm finally experiencing a series that has very quickly, like, skyrocketed to, like, my Mount Rushmore of video game
Wow.
series. Like, I I'm not big on this genre, like, in practice. I love it in theory, not big in practice, as I've made very clear. And yet in this month alone, right? I think I've had a better time playing video games, even though I've been stressed most of the time I'm playing. I've had a better time playing video games than I've had most of the last couple of years or so, with a few notable exceptions. And so it's one of those things where I'm really glad that I did it. And that's just to say, like, sometimes it's okay to approach a game in a way that other people tell you is not how you should play it, right? Like,
Oh,
there isn't
sure.
there isn't a right way to do this stuff. It comes back to that theory is, like, no gatekeeping here, right? Like get into the game in whatever way you need to get into it. And if you have fun with it, like that's all that matters. And for me, that's been like the big joy of these last couple months of not like anticipation for Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, just like trying something new. Figured I was going to clear some backlog, jumped into the series, and now I'm hooked, right? Like I said, I was putting down. I finished 4, which I absolutely loved. By the way, I understand why it's a top 3 game for some people. Um, and I was going to pick up something else. I was going to take a break from Resident Evil for a little bit. I started up like 3 other games, played for maybe 10 minutes each, and then I started Village, and I think I've put 5 hours into that since I since I jumped into it a few days ago, and I'm loving it. Even though again, it's I'm running into issues of just personal fear, but it's been really cool. It's been a cool experience for me to check out a series that I never thought I'd get very far in and finally make some progress.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Mainlining Resident Evil for the past 3 weeks. That
Yeah, man.
sounds fun. All right. Let's wrap there. And well, I guess we'll get to our game recommendations of the week,
Sure.
and then we can wrap. So, do you have any other recommendation outside of Resident Evil,
No, my
Matthew?
recommendation is play a Resident Evil game. I don't care which one you play. Just jump in there and check one out. Well, don't play Zero. Zero kind of sucks. But other than that, jump in there, man. Check one out. I mean, all of the ones that are on the Switch are good entries. I think even 5 and 6. People say they're fun if they're a little nonsensical. People still enjoy them. So I would say just get in there and play one. My recommendation, if you had to pick one though, if you like first person, check out and you don't mind being really scared, play 7. It's really good, top tier game. If not, either go with the original RE4 if you only have a Switch, or check out the remake if you have something else, and if not, play RE2 because that's a really phenomenal remaster.
All right. So my recommendation started off as a joke on Twitter with us. Um, we were waiting for the Xenoblade 3 DLC. It came out pretty late in the night.
9 p.m. last night, yeah, as
Yeah,
of
what
time
was the
of
deal?
record.
Anyway, uh, so I was waiting on that. Didn't have anything else to do, and I was like, Matthew is always bothering me because I've never played Xenogears.
My favorite.
Maybe I should just play Xenogears. So I spent like 3.5, 4 hours last night playing Xenogears and could not stop. I mean, I was so into
Yeah.
that game. I think they do such a great job of incorporating like the super 90s anime cutscenes
Mm-hmm.
into the world. The art is really nice too. The
Yeah.
pixel graphics are really really nice. But my save file got corrupted,
Ugh,
and so I lost all of that. So
that's always a
anyway,
hard start.
so I was really upset last night, and I went to bed like so frustrated. But then I woke up this morning, and I was like, I've just got to play it again. I've just got to figure out like my save problem
Yeah.
and play it again because it was such a good game. It's people can't stop talking about it online, right? Like and it paved the way for all of the other Xeno games.
Yeah.
I've got to get through it.
Yeah. Look, we'll talk at length about that game when you do or if you do. I think I'm very curious to see how it holds up for someone who didn't play it when it first came out, because I think I have no, I know I have strong nostalgia for it, and I know that I'm looking at it with rose tinted glasses because there are issues, there's problems, and there's stuff that does not hold up today. But I still hold it as my favorite JRPG. Like that's for sure. It's my favorite JRPG despite its flaws. And yes, a lot of that is nostalgia, right? I admit that there are better playing games, there are games with better stories, but I think that there is something about the moment when that came out, my where I was and how I experienced that game that keep it firmly like lodged there. Um, I'm very curious to see how you feel about the second disc, which is incredibly controversial because, again, it was originally meant to be, I believe, Final Fantasy VIII, got spun off into its own thing, and eventually came out rushed and had
Incomplete,
some,
right?
yeah, yes and no, right? There's been sort of controversy about that. I think the creators have said that the vision is what they wanted, but there's the basically the second disc plays out for the first handful of hours more like a visual novel where you experience the story and see the scenes play out with only a few battles as opposed to like the first disc. And it's very well known and very controversial um, move that I think works really well. But I'm curious to see how you feel about it when you get there. If you
It's a
get
pretty short game, right? It's only like 20 or 30 hours.
it, I think it's closer to 40, 50. I think it's
Is
closer
it?
to 40,
Okay.
50.
I
Though
thought it was a little
again,
shorter.
been a long time, so I can't say for sure. I know it's 2 discs, like I said. I can't say for sure because it's been so long, and I did play it to completion. Like I did a lot of grinding, I did a lot of arena battling and stuff like that. So my playtimes might be skewed, but yeah,
I'm really excited about it. When I was playing it last night, I didn't expect to get wrapped up in it. I never even got to the Xenoblade DLC because I was so wrapped up
yeah,
in Xenogears. But it scratches that RPG or PS1 RPG aesthetic for me. You know,
yeah,
Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 9, uh, Grandia. Like it's scratching like that era of RPG itch for me.
yeah.
And I've got to go back to it. I mean, like I said, I lost 4 hours last night, but there's no way that I'm not gonna try it again after
That's
I
great.
figured out my save issue. I've got to figure that out first.
I think it's worth it. I think it still has some of my favorite characters. The party is really good. The gameplay is fun. It's stylish as all get out. So worth the time, worth the effort. And I'd love to talk about it once you're a little further in. But I think that'll do it for us tonight. I mean, again, I just kind of wanted a chance to talk about Resident Evil. I've been hooked on this series for a bit. Wanted to talk about my experience with it. So I appreciate you humoring me with this episode. And we'll be back at it with, I think, what, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed Impressions
Yeah,
next week.
yeah, that's next week, and then we've got a big May planned,
Yes,
a month full of Zelda episodes. So get ready for that, and we're gonna give away a copy of Tears of the Kingdom. So stay tuned
there it
for
is.
some information about that.
Confirmation. You heard it here first. Justin is getting ready for the big giveaway.
The big giveaway. All right,
Right on, man.
guys.